Caregiving can sometimes feel like an impossible struggle. Caregivers may be torn between taking care of loved ones and trying to maintain balance in life. The good news is that it doesn't have to be that way. The Caring Generation with host Pamela D Wilson is here to focus on the conversation of caring. You're not alone. In fact, you're in exactly the right place to share stories and learn tips and resources to help you and your loved ones. So now, please welcome the host of The Caring Generation, Pamela D Wilson.
This is Pamela D Wilson, caregiving expert, speaker, consultant, and guardian of the Caring Generation. Thanks for joining me for this week's show. This is episode 203, year 6 of the Caring Generation podcast. This year's format is Take 15, actionable tips and helpful insights in about 15 minutes or thereabout. But because of all of the information I want to cover in this episode, it may go a little longer. This week, the topic is the experiences of dementia caregivers. If you find this podcast helpful, please like it and follow it on your favorite podcast app. Your participation through likes and follows helps the show reach more people worldwide looking for hope, help, and support for their health or when caring for elderly parents, spouses, or other family members. If you have a question or an idea for a future program, go to my website, PamelaDWilson.com, click on Contact, and complete the Caregiver Survey. So, the experiences of dementia caregivers have a lot of costs and expenses that go along with them that we're going to talk about. Some caregivers find caring for loved ones with dementia and memory loss very fulfilling. Others find the experience draining to the degree that some say it's worse than death. These two opposite perspectives depend a lot on information the caregiver has, education, and ability to plan, and family support. On the podcast page on my website for this episode 203, there's a video called Worse Than Death: Dementia Care Experiences. Be sure to go there and check it out. It will be up within a day of this podcast because the video shares details about BVTD, Behavioral Variant Frontal Temporal Dementia. It's very difficult to diagnose. It presents one of the most challenging care situations faced by dementia caregivers. I'll talk briefly about it during this program, but that video goes into a lot more detail. During this podcast, to talk about dementia care experiences, I'm going to combine my professional experience as a care manager, a court-appointed guardian, and a power of attorney for my clients diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's disease by sharing two stories that will start with the initial diagnosis and move through stressful situations that family caregivers have to go through in making very difficult decisions. Also included in the show, I'm going to talk about, as I mentioned, the expenses and the economic and social impacts experienced by caregivers, and then the emotional aspects and how caregivers can take better care of themselves to remain strong and balanced so that you can make difficult decisions when needed. So, let's start with the diagnosis. There are always two sides to every story. One side wants the diagnosis so that the caregiver and the person with memory loss can learn and understand about the disease and work together to make the best of it and plan ahead. On the other side, there are family members who are not willing at all to talk about the diagnosis. These family members say that the person with dementia would not like or want to hear the diagnosis, or they would refuse to accept the information. Some would be more stressed out. So these family members believe that why increase emotional distress? Why bring it up? And in some situations, this is the middle one, memory loss may have been going on for so long without a diagnosis that getting a diagnosis and then trying to explain it would be really pointless, because the person with memory loss would forget that explanation in seconds. I have been in all three of these situations. Let me share the two opposites. The first relates to the caregiver who wants to work with the person so that both can understand and plan and make the best of it. In this case, I was initially appointed power of attorney and then guardian for an elderly woman who was never married and had no children. My involvement started when the police and Adult Protective Services received a call from her bank that she wasn't managing her money well and strangers were showing up at the bank with her. There were also a couple of incidents with her car, one an accident and the second her getting lost. A roofing company took advantage of her. The lower floor of her home had been flooded because she forgot to turn off a faucet. My initial visit to her home was with an Adult Protective Service worker that I knew very well and who had come to know her and who this lady trusted. We talked about how I would help the client, and we gained her agreement because at the time she was having difficulties managing her money and paying bills and with other issues. So the bill paying was the first project that I agreed to tackle. I contacted her niece, who lived back east, and introduced myself to let her know who I was, how I became involved, so that there was complete transparency. No secrets about what was happening, as I didn't want it to appear that I was another person taking advantage of this woman. Now, coincidentally, this niece, who was caring for her mother, my client's sister, disclosed that her mother was also diagnosed with dementia. So there was a very high likelihood that this was in the family. So my first project, as I mentioned, I went through my client's mail. It was piled up on her kitchen table in stacks 6 to 10 inches high. A lot of late payment warnings and notices. And with her, we went through all the mail, brought all the payments up to date. I retained an attorney who spoke to my client about medical and financial power of attorney and made sure she understood what powers she would be granting and what this help would entail. I became the medical power of attorney. A colleague of mine from a separate company became her financial power of attorney. A couple of months into our relationship, in the mail, there was a cancellation notice from her long-term care insurance company because she missed a payment. If you don't know what long-term care insurance is, it is a voluntary policy that anyone can purchase, either through your employer if it's offered there or from an independent long-term care insurance agent. These policies pay for the costs of care when you're older and need services that Medicare does not pay for, like in-home caregivers, assisted living, community, nursing home care. I called the company. I confirmed that I could reinstate the policy under 2 conditions. 1, obvious, make a payment. 2, a written letter from a doctor with a diagnosis of memory loss to explain why my client missed her payment. The letter actually came at a good time because it allowed me to talk to my client about why she forgot to pay the bill. She knew she was a little forgetful, and I looked through her records. I confirmed she hadn't seen a doctor in quite some time, so I suggested that might be a good idea just to get a diagnosis to see what was going on, so that if she does have memory loss, we could have the doctor write a letter to reinstate her long-term care insurance policy. And then at least we would know what we were working with regarding her memory loss and making a plan for the future. She agreed that this was a very practical next step. And I'll say that this was not an easy conversation, but it worked because I just matter-of-factly presented the information. The conversation was, your long-term care insurance policy has lapsed. It's being canceled. To have it reinstated, we need to know if you have memory loss because you think that you are forgetful. So the next step is to go to the doctor. And fortunately, because she was very practical and always paid her bills, she actually worked in public health during her career. So she knew the importance of seeing doctors and being preventative about health. So as I suspected, the doctor diagnosed her with mild cognitive impairment. She wasn't happy with the news, but she accepted it. I asked him to write a letter. I submitted it to her long-term care insurance company, and the policy was reinstated. The next uncomfortable discussion had to be about the car. She wasn't safe driving. The police brought her home a couple of times. They definitely did not want her driving. That discussion, again, while not easy, was presented in a practical manner. You've had an accident. You got lost. The police had to bring you home a couple times. She agreed that the car had to be sold, and I would set up caregivers to take her wherever she wanted. Now let's look at the opposite side. My client on the other side had memory loss that had just gone way too far. And she could not understand and definitely did not like hearing the word Alzheimer's. And so for my clients in these situations, my role was less consultative than I was with the first client situation I described. I had to be more direct, still matter of fact, and this sometimes would bring out unpleasant responses from my clients. But because I was that legally responsible party, I had to relay unpleasant information, which many family members in these roles either avoid or find very difficult to do. However, I did it with a strategy. In this case, it was an issue with the car. I told the client that the conservator who was managing her money was selling the car because she had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease and it was no longer safe to drive. Now, as you can imagine, she did not take that information very well. She was angry. However, one day the car was in the garage. The next day it was gone. The next thing I had to talk to this client about was that living in her home was not an option because of safety concerns and her inability to care for herself. Even with caregivers I had scheduled to see her, the house was still a mess. Dirty dishes were in the sink. She couldn't wash them. She forgot to take medications, and her dog was never being let out to do its business. So I did some research. I found a nice small board and care home where I could move a lot of her belongings, and it would turn out to be a good situation for her. I told her once, that she was moving. On the day of the move, I had a caregiver take her out all day so that I could go to the house, meet the movers, pack, collect her belongings, take them to the board and care home, get her room all set up. At the end of the day, the caregiver brought her to the board and care home. And any questions about why am I here were responded with, this is your new home now. Navigating either of these two situations that I described can be traumatic and emotionally stressful for family caregivers. This is why consulting with experts like myself, who have had the personal experience and the legal responsibility caring for clients, can help caregivers understand that having difficult conversations and making difficult decisions is many times necessary with persons with dementia. These decisions and confirmations and conversations can be approached in a right manner when you do your research. You do research, you confirm that this is a reasonable decision and that it's practical. Now, the difficulties arise when what I call second-level family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, can disagree, or even your siblings can disagree. And they put a lot of stress and guilt on the caregiver who has to make these decisions. The problem is, they don't have to make the decisions. They're not showing up every day and seeing what's happening. They're going on with their lives. So it's easy for them to second guess. It's easier for them to judge. The bottom line is that if you are the caregiver and the legally responsible party, meaning agent under power of attorney, it's your duty, it's your responsibility to make good decisions and evaluate information and do what is best and reasonable, regardless of other people's opinions who are not involved on a day-to-day basis. So let's now talk about the economic and social aspects. And this usually involves caregivers who may not be the POA. They may be the POA, but in many cases not. So a lot of family caregivers will cut back on their working hours or give up a job entirely. This can be a spouse, this can be an adult child. Before you do this, before you reduce your work hours or give up a job, it's important to be very blunt and direct with yourself about the short and long-term financial and economic impacts. How will you pay your bills and living expenses? Are you moving in with a parent? Is your intention and your expectation that their income becomes yours and that a parent financially supports both of you? If you are a power of attorney, is this a good decision? Is this practical? In any situation, ask yourself these questions. How long will you be off work? How easy will it be to get a job when you're ready to work again? What about your health insurance? What about contributing to your retirement and your savings and the money you will lose by not working? These are hard but practical decisions that might change your mind about reducing or giving up work altogether. And if you are the power of attorney, I would be very cautious in making this decision. Then let's talk about the emotional strain of caring for loved ones with dementia. Dementia is not a short-term assignment. It can last for years, 5, 10, 20, more. The longer it lasts, the more care a spouse or aging parent will need. If you have a great family situation, good family support, you get time off to socialize, take breaks, go on vacation, take care of your health, obviously that's the ideal situation. Unfortunately, it is a very rare situation. Most caregivers do it all themselves. They do it all alone. Less than 15%, 20% seek help or education. Education and knowledge are the two factors that make caregiving less stressful and more bearable, because these caregivers know more about what to expect and face fewer surprises. Worrying about the unknown can be a huge stressor. Because of uncertainty, worry, and all the tasks to be completed, caregivers neglect their health. Caregivers suffer from just as many chronic illnesses as the person with dementia: heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, breathing issues, physical injuries, or disabilities. And because of not seeking regular medical care or engaging in positive and preventative health habits, the health of the caregiver gets worse. Add to this the decision to stop working can affect access to health insurance and money to pay for co-pays and medications, things that would be good for a caregiver's health. However, lack of access to insurance negatively affects a caregiver's health. Honestly, there are few, if any, discussions about promoting healthy lifestyles for caregivers. I talk about this all the time, for caregivers and for anybody with a health concern. The goal is caregivers need to be healthy if they want to take care of other people. If you don't want to need a caregiver, you need to be healthy. You need to promote a healthy lifestyle. Sick caregivers may not be good caregivers for loved ones. So while care at home may not be ideal, many caregivers look at moving a loved one out of a home to a care community as a personal failure that makes them feel guilty or bad for not being able to do a good job, or to continue to be a caregiver. And in many situations, this is not true. The caregivers have done this for years. They are just worn down, worn out, burned out, and sick. Then let's add the stress of behaviors to a dementia care situation. Many middle-aged adults under age 60 can have a form of dementia called behavioral variant frontotemporal dementia. And it has a lot of behaviors in common with dementia and Alzheimer's. At the beginning of the podcast, I referred to a video I created about this topic. So if you want to learn more, go to my website, PamelaDWilson.com, click on the media tab, then the Caring Generation podcast, and search for episode 203, where you can scroll down on that page and find the video. The challenge with BVTD is it's often undiagnosed. And the way that you can tell if a loved one has this, or at least suspect, is when they have a lot of behaviors. And it's important to diagnose these. So behaviors can include inappropriate social behavior, saying rude things to people out of the blue, being apathetic, meaning no interest in doing anything. They sit in front of the TV and they watch TV all day and they don't care about anything else. They're not motivated to do anything else. They severely lack empathy or sympathy for others, including you, the caregiver, which means they're probably mean to you. They probably insult you. They don't appreciate anything you do. People with this type of dementia can have obsessive behaviors or repetitive habits. They can be angry and aggressive. And all of these behaviors, whether it's BVTD, regular dementia, or Alzheimer's, can be very draining and destructive to the health of the caregiver. These types of behavioral situations, in addition to all the other hands-on care that has to be provided, bathing, dressing, feeding, all of this make many dementia caregivers say that their daily lives are probably worse than being dead, or they'd rather be dead. If you're in one of these care situations, seek support, seek information and education. Choose to be different. Make the time to do this rather than saying, Pamela, I don't have time, I'm too busy. You're working your way into a health situation that will eventually be unsustainable. You won't be able to take care of yourself or your loved one. If you lack time, consult with a caregiving expert like myself, even if it's only for 30 minutes. You might be surprised how an impartial discussion can help caregivers identify problems and create plans to care for themselves. And if necessary, caregivers can work themselves out of being the sole caregiver for a loved one who needs a great deal of hands-on care and who has a lot of behaviors that are harmful to the physical and the emotional health and the well-being of the caregiver. Caregiving should be a positive experience. Not saying that it's going to be easy all the time, but it should be positive and rewarding. If the situation harms either the caregiver or the person diagnosed with an illness, dementia or any illness, that care situation has become imbalanced, and it is time to seek support, information, advice, and time to consider other options. I thank you all so much for being here. Please like and follow this podcast. Share it with others you know who are seeking hope, help, and support. I'm Pamela D Wilson, a caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker. You're with me on the Caring Generation. If you want to learn more about me and the support available, just go to my website, PamelaDWilson.com. I look forward to being with you again soon. God bless you all. Sleep well tonight. Have a fabulous day today and tomorrow, and enjoy each day until we are here together again.
Tune in each week for the Caring Generation with host Pamela D. Wilson. Come join the conversation and see how Pamela can provide solutions and peace of mind for everyone. Here on Pamela D. Wilson's The Caring Generation.